Welcome to This Week in White Supremacy. My name is Jasiri X. I'm co-founder, CEO of One Hood Media. Today we have a very, very special episode and interview for you as the world is focused on rap beef and rappers and hip hop. We have an interview with someone that's considered one of, or if not the greatest rapper of all time, Black Thought of the legendary Roots crew. Sit back, take a listen as we go into his career, the roots, and how he feels about the current state of hip hop. This Week in White Supremacy, y'all. Peace. One Hood.
Come on now. Yes, indeed. I tried to say arguably one of, and they said no. They said the, you know what I'm saying? Yes. So when you, when you hear that, as somebody that has, I would argue maybe reached master status in terms of a pen game. I mean, how does that make you feel to dedicate yourself to a craft that, you could argue maybe tens of millions of people have done it, and outside of all of those raps that have been written, people consider yours the best?
Yeah, it's a blessing. I'm really, I'm just really grateful and thankful that, my career has spanned as many years as it has, and that I've had as many opportunities to sort of reinvent myself and, make a new sort of demo, a new audience sort of familiar with what it is that I do.
Oh, yeah, we got a little feedback. Okay, Aaron? Okay, we got the engineer.
Yep,
we got it. I want to start with the Upcycled Self. Another, I guess, check on your career as New York Times best-selling author of the Upcycled Self. And it was really, to me, powerful in terms of how you talked about like grief and loss being something not to necessarily hold us back, but being, things that kind of propelled you to the point you are now. I'm interested in was there like a pre-work that you did to come to that point to say, I want to share this with, other folks that might be struggling with grief or loss, particularly as Black men?
Yeah. It's interesting that you asked that question because there was, the pre-work would have been the Audible original words and music piece called 7 Years. So 7 Years, which I, also collaborated on with Jasmine Martin, my co-author on the Upcycled Self. She's, she's my right hand in the game, and we were working, I guess, during pandemic on 7 Years. And I just began to sort of uncover, when you got to go through it to get to it. And in the going through it part of the process, there was so much that I was sort of digging up, and, emotions and, past trauma and experiences that I never addressed, stuff that I never spoke to in my music, life experiences that people who went to sort of elementary school and high school and college with me weren't even aware of. So yeah, I felt like during that process, I hit something that began to feel, cathartic in a way. So there was that. And then there was, the whole second part was just the timeliness of it all, right? I started to, 2017, 18, I would run into longtime Roots supporters, people who have been my fans for years. And, they would tell me that for all of their extensive sort of knowledge of my catalog and, all the albums that they had copped and the interviews that they had seen, they still didn't feel as though they knew me as an artist, and that, there was a personal element that was sort of missing from my art. So that became what I strove to articulate, you know what I mean? And just to connect with my audience in a new way and on just a more personal level. And when, people who weren't aware of my story started to find out about my story, they were able to, they saw themselves in some of it, you know what I mean? So there was representation, but people were able to, the takeaway was that it was helpful, you know what I mean? And like my trajectory, the story of my life, my lived experience was, you know, giving folks something substantial that they could then apply to their own, you know, equation. So once I sort of, you know, caught wind of that, that's what we leaned into. And that's, you know, what the Upcycled Self sort of evolved from.
It's, I think what's fascinating about it to me is that oftentimes in hip hop, people do kind of lean on those, you know, experiences. There was a TikTok video that I thought was funny where it was like a rapper in the classroom. And the teacher said something to it, and it was like he pulled his notebook out. Oh, the teacher dissed me. I'm about to write this rap.
Right.
And it's interesting to me at a time where you saw rappers like really heavily saying like this happened in my past, and you know I went through this stuff. You chose not to do that and really focus on more the artistry of it. Was that a conscious decision for you to say, even though you're watching kind of people like blow up in a sense off of like this is how my past made me, you like didn't choose to do that in your music in an overt way?
Yeah, you know, I think it was more a conscious decision not to, again, to, you know, add any sort of momentum to stereotypes, tropes, things like that. You know, I didn't want to come off as predictable or, you know, typical in any way, shape, or form. So that's part of it. But then the other part was that the Roots was always a collective. So, you know, I was in like one group that formed just for a talent show when I was in like 4th grade. And then I was just a solo sort of artist, an MC, right up until I was in 9th or 10th grade, and I met Questlove. So it was my first group has been the Roots. So this is the only sort of thing that I've been, you know, a part of as, you know, an ensemble. And it's a collective. And my beliefs, my lived experience, the way I feel, my opinion, it isn't the end all be all. It doesn't represent the way everybody in the group sort of feels. And it's always been that way. So yeah, you know, I think it's just been about acknowledging that and sort of respecting that. You know, I think yeah, there's much that I've sort of, you know, been able to represent from a personal standpoint as an artist. You know, socio-political commentary that I've been able to make.
Absolutely.
You know, speaking for myself. But yeah, it doesn't always apply. Like I can't always make that sweeping statement about, you know, the Roots. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that's why up until now I hadn't really worn my personal story sort of on my sleeve. You know what I'm saying?
That's fascinating. It reminds me, you know, we did a conversation with Chuck D, and he talked about the collective of Public Enemy. And he talked about how like he liked Flavor Flav's presence because it allowed him to like back up.
Absolutely.
And not be like at the forefront of it.
Yeah.
Did you feel the same? Because I mean, you know, you talk about like being an introvert.
Yeah.
And so it's like, although you're like the front man, it was always like this mystery to you. And it was always like you're the front man, but you kind of like blended into the collective and weren't like, you know, like where you see like a Mick Jagger. You know, we talk about front men of bands, oftentimes they're like super out front. And you kind of like almost camouflage inside the group. Was that also like an intentional thing for you?
Yeah, for me it was. Yeah, for me it was. I've never been, you know, I accepted the role of sort of lead singer, you know, by default. You know what I mean? The Roots, when we signed our deal, and I mean, from college on, from the time I met, you know, Malik B, may he rest in peace. I mean, even before Malik, there were always other MCs, you know what I mean, active in the Roots. There was Crumbs, Dice Raw, Foreign Objects, like this whole extended family. But, you know, in the Roots, there was always at least one other rapper until there wasn't. And then when there wasn't, I was just faced with the, you know, I had the option of just sort of, you know, letting the band become stagnant or adapting and just beginning to rap everybody else's lyrics. So that's sort of what I did. But in that, I never had a desire to be, you know, famous or, you know, in the forefront of a thing, because I'm low key like that. So it's been, you know, like a double-edged sort of, you know, sword for me throughout my career. You know what I'm saying? It's just the irony of that, you know, this is the career path that I've chose, and I'm not into, you know, creating content. I'm not into taking photos or videos or talking like shit like this, speaking in front. Like this is all, whenever I do something like this, it's an exercise in overcoming my, introversion, which I think is very necessary and, better late, than never.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's still, it's a thing. It's an ongoing thing for me.
We appreciate you doing that, and here today for us. Y'all appreciate that? Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you. I mean, it's just, it's not for everyone, you know what I mean? Like the whole sort of total package that comes with it. Especially it wasn't for me. But for Quest, it's something that he had been groomed for from like, the womb. And then for as far back as I can remember, which is, again, I was in maybe 9th grade when he was in 10th or 11th, and he's known what he was going to do. He was, confident and content in his path, and he knew he was going to be a professional musician, whether it was with me or someone else. Like Quest has always known what he was going to do. He's practiced doing interviews his whole life. His wallpaper was cut out interviews from Spin Magazine and Rolling Stone, and so he just was articulate in a completely different way than I even was. When we signed a record deal, I was 19 years old. So I look at myself very much as, in many ways as a child, not a child star, but I was a child artist.
Definitely and a child prodigy, definitely.
Well, thank you. So all that said, I sort of got into this. I got into the group, and I chose this path for different reasons. You know what I mean? And just being out, like the last thing that I sort of would want to do is the heaviest lift for me.
Wow.
And that's the whole social and the interaction sort of thing. But
it's fascinating because in the book you talk about how like that the process of creating art was something that really helped you through these difficult times. You know what I'm saying? Like like losing your mom, like graffiti and visual art, and then music and MCing. And I see, we're an arts organization that firmly believe in like, what now people call like art therapy, and like how that creative spirit and process is so important to our community and helping. Can you just talk about how, those were things and how that process, and what that process has meant to you as like, that's what you would rather focus on, not the end where you got to like promote it, but how that process was like your first therapy?
For me, I mean, it was just that, the arts, right? Like, crossing mediums. You know what I mean? Spoken word and, creative writing and, just the theater. And, I came up as a visual artist until I became a musician, in high school sort of thing. But yeah, just the arts and arts education has always been huge for me in the example that it has set. You know what I mean? For me, coming up in Philly, coming up in South Philly, there wasn't very much representation beyond the block. So I think my mother, realized that when I was still at a relatively young age, that I was a creative person, and the way that my mind worked, and she sort of was able to lean into that without pushing me into it in a way that made me not want to do it. You know what I mean? So it was very nuanced, you know what I'm saying, the way she sort of presented it to me. But I always appreciated just, the opportunity to sort of get out into the world and do a thing, see and experience things, and then come back to the block, come back to the hood, right. And, and serve as the griot, or, serve as the person who lets you know what it's hitting for beyond the block. You know what I mean? That's always been huge for me. And even before I understood what that, was, and that was a tradition, and that was a whole rites of passage sort of deal. That's what I was into, and my mother peeped it, and it's sort of here I am today. But arts education, the arts and arts education is huge for me. And when the state, Pennsylvania, and the city of Philadelphia started cutting back, on funding for for art and for for gym and for anything all of the. For me, I really appreciated that brief reprieve from academics. You know what I mean? And I think it's huge. I think it's definitely therapeutic. It's mental health. It's physical health. It's huge. So that's something that I've always been supportive of. And the roots. That's what we do agree on as a collective. Is on the power of art and the salvation, you know what I mean, the potential of the arts as, as the saving grace, you know.
I that's powerful. I did want you to talk. Yeah, you can clap it up for that. You know what I'm saying? Thank you, Dice. You're so much a part. Like it's almost like yourself as an artist and the city of Philadelphia are like inseparable. It's like even it's like wherever you go, you represent Philadelphia. You talk about South Philadelphia. I remember in college being in a group with two brothers from West Philly, two brothers from South Philly, and like them taking me to Tasker projects and me being like, can I leave like immediately? Like it was like, please, like this is not where I want. It was a very uncomfortable situation. So can you just talk about like, because Philly is this place where it's very much like, when you think about Philly, you think about like a hard place. Yeah. You think about a place where like almost like Philly will like make you better and want to make you better. When you talk about athletes, we're going to boo you until you get good and then we'll cheer you. Like, what did that mean for you to be a product of that and now be like a representative of Philadelphia to the world?
Philadelphia definitely, the love that Philly bestows upon us is a tough love, and it's the sort of thing that, you talk about toxic relationships, you talk about, you know what I mean? Like, when you start to think about Philadelphia, because in the book, not only in my book, but, in our lives, like Philadelphia, the city plays just as much a role as any character, right? Sure. So, Philly it takes on an entity in and of itself. And in that, just as hard as Philly loves, it also negs. And it's the place that if you allow it to break you, it's gonna break you. But, in its attempts to break you, if you don't allow it to break you, then it's gonna, essentially begin to build you up. So, you talk about places like New York where they say if you can make it here, you can make it. Philly is that place. If you can make it in Philly, you could literally make it anywhere, but you just got to make it in Philly. You know what I'm saying? So, for me, I've always felt just a certain responsibility to represent, that place on the map. Because again, talking about in the 90s when we came up, the roots, there was no Philly music scene. There was no platform. There was no labels. There was, barely, the radio in Philly when we came out, they were all, promoting the no rap workday. So it was about, like straight R&B. We don't, we like that rap shit is trash. And we created something, where there was a void. And in that, knowing how, Philly operated, Philly is very much, show me, show and prove. So we had to, take the show on the road before we even brought the show home. So I started touring, doing shows in Europe, supporting jazz musicians and stuff like that. And then when we started traveling as the Roots, we went out, we recorded our first album to have merch to sell at the festivals in Europe. And that's what people, have heralded as a classic. That's our demo, that's Organics.
Right.
And, from Organics and from the buzz that it made sort of overseas, that's, where the bidding war, and that's how we sort of got our record deal, and that's how, we got the support of, just that hometown support. We began to become hometown heroes because, Philly caught wind of, what you had experienced in that the Roots and Philadelphia was sort of becoming synonymous.
Yes.
In a good way. You know what I mean? So, we
even introducing like Beans to
on
the national scene as well.
Yeah. We broke many an artist, but Beans and I were in Beanie Siegel and I were we started together. Same neighborhood. That talent show I was talking about when I was in the 4th grade. Yeah. He was in my group. He was a 3rd grader. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I remember we did my first talent show, I was in the 3rd grade, and we decided to sing The Barge. We sang this The Barge song. And I was up there, and all the girls was feeling it, but it was like, I just didn't feel right in my soul. I felt like, maybe that's the earliest, time I experienced imposter syndrome. Because I'm like, I'm a rapper up here. Like, why am I, singing Ooh When I Like It? You know what I mean? And we didn't win that year. And the next year, I was like, we rapping in the talent show next year. And, I just brought, Like Beans and my homie Randy and my cousins and people who were like, we had every element of hip hop sort of represented on that stage. And it was me, Beans, and another rapper, Waleed. We were like the 3 MCs. But as luck would have it, I did, like, you know what? I got suspended from school for doing the human beatbox back then. This is when the human beatbox, it was something new. It was like, what is that shit you're doing? You know what I mean?
That's hilarious.
So yeah, I was like off in the corner, you know, 4th grader, doing the human beatbox, showing my friend like how the bass goes, and I got suspended for, you know, it was obscene, right? So, but in my suspension, I think I was suspended the day of the talent show. And I was doing a human beatbox like to show my man like how we were gonna do it in the show or something. So now I get suspended, but they want me to finish out the day. So it's like, all right, you leave after school today and then just don't come back to school for 3 days. So I'm sitting in the auditorium and, you know, we had t-shirts, man. I got my t-shirt on. My group is on stage. Beans and them start rapping. It's like, I'm already suspended, so I just got on stage. I got up there. And that was like my first time like bum rushing the set. And like, I was like, yo, I'm getting this verse off, you know? Yeah.
No, that's not first time, but not the last.
Yeah, definitely.
So it was interesting. I remember, again, you know, if you go to Pitt, most of the black people there are from Philly.
Yeah.
And I remember when The Roots came out and somebody telling me about your story, and it was shocking to me because you all came out as a band. It was almost like an assumption that like you were like a different, like y'all had a different experience, right? Y'all could afford instruments. Y'all like learned the instruments, right? So it's almost like, oh, they not from the hood, they're a band. Did you all get like, because remember when it was new to hip hop. There was no, at least I didn't know of like a hip hop band.
Right.
And so it was to me, and then again, like you're not telling your personal story, you're creating, to me, some of the most amazing music. I come into The Roots with Do You Want More? You know what I'm saying? And of course, as somebody that was trying to rap, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. But I wasn't thinking like you were from the projects that I seen.
Yeah.
Did people like get that, or did people like I guess, assume like you had like a different background because you were part of this band?
Yeah, I think so. I think people assume that, you know, I just had a different background because, I mean, I think the live instrumentation was sort of, you know, one part of it, but another part, yeah, you know, yeah, I think it was, we were just a motley crew, right? There was that. We didn't dress the way, you know, sort of hip hop fashion was dressing at that point in time. The live instrumentation of it all. We weren't the first rap band, but we were the only band emerging at that time. And you know, mixing engineers, you know, it took a while before they figured out how to mix live stuff, or, you know, stuff that was a mix of live and sample to sound, you know what I mean, like what was happening on the radio, right? So our music looked, sounded, and felt different, you know what I mean? And we were fine with that because that was part of our brand. And in that, we were able to become all things to all people. And that, you know, we still do that shit. The Roots, whatever you need, we can, you know, accompany you. We can play it. I can sing it. If I can't sing it, I would love to just step back and let you rock with, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's how it sort of evolved, you know?
So I did, you know, when I think about, I guess, the moment for me, what they do, right? You know, when you produce that song and when you put that song, it's almost like a prophecy to where like hip hop is right now. You know what I'm saying? Like never do what they do, and you kind of parodied a process which is still like. I mean, do you see that? Were you attempting to do that? Was it like, this is where we're going? And it's like, we're still there. Like, we're still doing, you know what I'm saying? What you say, like, never do what they do.
The proverbial them are still
they still running the industry.
Yeah. You know, in my storytelling, that was the intention. But when it came down to do the music video, and which was often the case, you know, back in the day, it was there was a disconnect for many of us as artists in the 90s and the early 2000s with what your vision would be, how you would see, like the visual that, you know, you see in your mind when you're working on the music when you get to the point of dealing with budgets and, you know, how to execute a thing, right? And when you incorporate other writers and other people's vision who, you know, they didn't have as much of a stake invested in the sound, then that's when, you know, you start to get all these different, you have artists who pull up at a video shoot and you don't know what we doing today. So I was one of those artists, right? Just sort of trusting the process. And the director of that video, before he became a film director, he was a pretty popular commercial director, Charles Stone III. Right. His father's a legendary, you know, news journalist from Philly. So yeah, I was like trusting my man, and you know, that he understood the vision, right? And which he did, but you know, he took it to the extent of, okay, you know, which we were fine with all of the, you know, the parodies, right? You know what I mean? Everything, all the satire. But there was this one scene in that video for what they do where it was taken directly from, like the whole set was sort of lifted from a Biggie set. And then there was just like this one scene where I'm doing exactly what Biggie was doing in this video. And he really took it personally. He was really, you know, he was hurt by, you know what I mean, that because he had been a long time Roots supporter. You know what I mean? So yeah, I definitely, if there's any regret involved in that whole sort of era, I would, you know, just be more in tune with everything that's going on with the group. And I would, you know, because in that video, I had no idea. Like, you know, people like, yo, why you this big? I don't know what you're talking about. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You did the shit from the One More Chance video. I'm like, I didn't see One More Chance video. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, when I did the Knowledge, it was the same thing. And in the video where we were making such sweeping sort of generalizations, he was like, yo, why y'all going to single me out? You know, when I'm one of the people who have, you know, that have been championing.
So y'all were able to have that conversation, or?
Well, no, we didn't have it face to face, but he talked about it in the interview, in interviews. You know what I mean? He went on like a little Source magazine, Double XL magazine, and you know the publications of the day. And in it, he was just saying like, you know, like the Roots. I would rock with the Roots. They dissed me. I'm not gonna say that, you know what I mean? It's beef with me, like if I see the Roots, I see the Roots, but I can't speak for the rest of Brooklyn. Like he was trying to make it, he was really, you know, in the papers trying to make it so, you know, like we had to check in and stuff like that. But it's wild, you know, we lived in London at the time. Like most of 1994 and beginning of 95, we moved to London because, like I said, we went over there to get ourselves established, and that's where the work sort of was, and we were able to make money, do shows and record and stuff, but we couldn't afford to really commute back and forth across the pond. So we just had an apartment, and we stayed over in London for like, you know, a year and a half. So during that time, that's when we lost big, and, you know, it was a lot going on, and we were never able to really face-to-face resolve the issue, but, you know, with Mark Pitts, who was managing Big at the time, we were able to resolve the issue.
That's a blessing. That's beautiful. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, so it's interesting because you know, it's currently a lot of issues in hip hop right now, in rap music right now. I mean, you're somebody that I don't think any artist has came directly to test you, and I would
not any artist worth their salt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's been people.
So, I mean, how do you see, like, do you see, when people say, like, rap is a competitive, hip-hop is a contact sport, Absolutely. do you view it like that as well?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, does that, so how do you see, like, this moment where you have, like, a clash of some of the, you know.
Clash of the Titans?
Yeah.
I think there's value in it, there's beauty in it, you know what I'm saying? We were talking earlier. You know, some of my students at NYU asked me a week ago, you know, how I felt about J.Cole's apology to Kendrick, you know, a day or so after putting out a diss record. Right. And though I hadn't heard any of the music, I thought it was a beautiful thing. I thought, you know, like that's what's unprecedented, right? I said, you know, what we've seen, you know, time and time again, you know, since the 80s, you know what I'm saying, are, you know, MCs going, you know what I mean, back and forth, like battling it out. Sometimes, you know, they keep it to the record. Sometimes, you know, it gets physical and it gets, you know what I mean, crazy. What we've yet to see is, you know, somebody nip that in the bud, right? And that's what I felt like he was, you know, in effect doing. And, you know what I mean, I felt like it just showed, you know, humility, nobility, and just, you know, just a sense of elevation, you know, that you don't, you see too often across the board.
It's like the Upcycled Self, right?
Yeah,
I mean, he literally like could have done something that everybody else did, but like took it and kind of said, no, I want to go here with it.
Exactly.
And I'm more concerned about like my peace and myself as an artist, and not like pleasing a group of people that want to see kind of like blood sport. That's like a beautiful example. I wonder if he read the book, you know what I'm saying? Because it's right in line with that.
I don't know if he read the book. I mean, you know, maybe. But yeah, I think it's just that, you know, when the plane's going down, you got to situate your own oxygen mask first. And I feel like, you know, he's been on a trajectory of just that, of self-revelation and, you know, investing into himself. And I feel like, you know, his mind, spirit, body, soul, music, everything, you know, was sort of better for it. And I told you another story earlier about, like, this is how I sort of understand J.Cole, right? I don't know the brother well, but he and I, you know, had talked about doing music together at one point. And shortly after, you know, the beginning of 2018, he hit me like, yo, let's do an album, you know? I told him to send me some music, you know what I mean? I told him I was with it. It wasn't like this, it wasn't send me some music to see if I want to do it. It was like, send me, like, let me see what you're thinking. And he sent me a batch of beats, and they all just felt so close to, I guess, something roots-centric, you know, that I didn't want, at the time, you know, I was trying to sort of step outside of what I'd done in the roots, and I just didn't feel like we were, you know, lining up. So I think I asked him to do a different batch. I gave him like an explanation, and in my explanation, I think I scared him off, like, because I was, you know, maybe some of the trigger words that I was using, like, I want something hard. You know what I mean?
Aggression, right? Yeah.
This beat ain't aggressive enough. Like, you know what I mean? I think he wasn't on that. He's on a peaceful journey.
I think you probably scare off a lot of MCs.
Yeah, but no, you know, I was talking with another artist recently, and she told me that she had a similar experience in that she had hired J. Cole to work. He came to do some production and to feature. He arrived at the studio, and she was in the middle of another conversation where she was venting, you know, in the middle of a bunch of complaints. And he sat there momentarily, and then he just got up and left, and she hasn't seen him since. It's like, you know, he's not trying to, you know, engage with the bullshit. So I feel like, you know, he acted on emotion probably. He did this record and, you know, immediately regretted it, but had already pulled the trigger and was like, you know, how can I now, you know, take the high road? And I think he set a beautiful example, so.
I agree, and took it off streaming, but you didn't tell the full story because you didn't talk about what the reason J. Cole reached out to you is because that bomb you dropped
well,
in 2017
you know,
on Funk Flex. And I want, which like, so I have a few questions about that. One, like, did you think when you sat down that what you said was gonna reverberate? And that was when Twitter was still a thing, where, I mean, it just reverberated, and then there was a group of people probably in this room that was like, y'all just finding out who Black Thought is? Y'all just knowing? Like, get into his catalog. But did you think, like, when you sat in that seat, that, like, you were about to, like, shift the hip-hop culture? In many ways, like the Control verse did. Like, that verse shifted the culture where people will play that. Like, you know, people play it in the club, like a DJ will mix that.
No, you know what I mean? And I think the fact that I didn't, you know, put so much on it, I think that's what adds to sort of the allure. That's what, you know, that's sort of what I do. You know, I overthink things. You know, I you know, invest a lot of energy and thought into what it is that I'm gonna do, and then the idea is to make it, you know, is to forget all of that and just, you know, exist and just be present in the moment, and, you know, just as nonchalant and effortless as possible. And that's what I think, you know, that's the wonder. Like, that's you know, the meeting of those two sort of extremes is sort of is where I exist. So yeah, I remember that day, man. It was like, first of all, it was about 18 degrees, windy, you know, New York City brick winter, super cold day. You know, it was 18, but the real feel was way lower. We taped 2 episodes of Tonight Show that day. So this was a Thursday. Wow. We did 2 shows, you know what I mean? Which meant the next day we weren't gonna do a show. So it was a Friday off the next day. And I just remember, like, you know, having had, you know, I was done with it, you know what I mean, that day. I, you know, probably been working from like 9 to, at this point, 9, and I just wanted to get in there. I wasn't doing 2 takes. I didn't want to do that much of an interview. I didn't want all the pleasantries. So that's sort of what you see. You see, like, you know, Flex and I, we had a bit of a conversation before the beat drop, But my whole thing was, look, this is the music I'm rapping over. I'm not using Beats headphones. I got my in-ears already from work, and let's just go. And as soon as the beat came on, I just started rapping. And I made quite a few mistakes. And there was a bunch of stuff, like moves that I made, and there's just like a path. There's a sort of a bobbing and weaving that I'm doing in the song that is, it was very unintentional. You know what I mean? Things come out when you're improvising that. Even a second before you said them, you heard it and heard yourself saying and doing it a different way. So it's not a perfect performance, you know what I mean, in that. But I think, I think in its flawedness, I think there's also beauty in that too.
It's art, right? And it's like, when you paint that picture, and as an artist, you might see, oh, I could have put this here or this here, but like to the listener, it was just like, whoa, like it was like, and it kind of made, I was like, I don't know who's next, but I wouldn't want to be the next person in that seat because you took it to a level where it's like, and I don't think we've heard another, freestyle on that show that like lived up to that performance. You know what I mean?
Royce has been back. My son has been back.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been, it's a handful of artists who sort of take it serious in that way. But I definitely think I upped the stakes. There's no one has been up to flex, since me who that's the bar.
That's the bar. Yeah.
I think in that, I don't think that my title has been taken yet. So that's why I just still
come on, bro.
I just be on some chill shit.
Put numbers on the board.
Flex been asking me to come back up, and my brother Cosmic Kevin feel like it's people all over the country like, yo, come and give us that. But yeah, I just feel like if I still got the belt, there's no reason to.
Damn, come on, man. That's crazy. You mentioned the Tonight Show, and I really wanted to, because different from most like groups, right? Most of the time in the music industry, you put an album out, you tour, and then you kind of go back and like maybe work for the next couple of years. You all as a Roots like stayed on the road. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You all were doing 200, maybe more shows a year, and then hit this point where you decided like, hey, let's go, do the Tonight Show. I just wonder, like, now that you're doing it tonight, like, do you miss the road? Like, and what was the difference, in terms of like hitting this road and doing the different shows and feeling different energy to like, now we're kind of in front of the studio audience and being able to interact with different artists and do like, maybe even some more creative things, like your personality has come out on like the Tonight Show in terms of even some skits that you get into.
Yeah. Earlier on, man, we were what was referred to as road warriors, in that we got everything we got was from the road. I didn't record albums with the intention of, oh, this is gonna be a big hit, this is the single, this is gonna do this and that. We would record Roots albums so we had new music to tour. You know what I'm saying? And we would go and we just support our most recent release and keep up appearances in all these places around the world where we were able to sort of work our way up from the mud, right? A good example is, a festival in Copenhagen, Denmark called Roskilde that happens, every year. We started playing this festival in the 90s where we were in like a tent sort of structure outside the perimeter, and our credentials didn't even get us into, like the main joint. And we did that, and over time, we played, the fourth and third and second, and eventually we headlined that festival with Bruce Springsteen. You know what I mean? 150,000 people, and we went on before Springsteen as a co-headliner, but he couldn't follow that act, so he had to bring us back out like, yo, could y'all come before?
Oh,
shit. So, but it's we have been able to over time work our way up, around the world in that way, and then. That started to began to feel just more uncertain. You think about 07, 08, when the way that we receive just all media was changing. And, it was just this whole sort of unprecedented, this was the beginning of Napster.
Right, Napster, LimeWire.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So all of that was changing, the way we would receive recorded music and the way folks would, the way we looked at concerts. was changing. It was iPod shuffle culture, and people's attention span was, getting a lot shorter. What was considered a feature album was getting a lot shorter, and it was just, there was a seismic, but not much unlike what's happening right now. It was a whole sort of changing of the guard, seismic shift that was taking place, and it was very tangible. And it was in that uncertainty, we were like, yo, we just hit a stride where we like, yo, we making some money now. You know what I'm saying? We're making some money, but not enough money where we could not do 200 shows a year, but just, it was sufficient. We were self-sufficient as a unit. And then the opportunity to start late night presented itself. And it was like, wow, we had just hit a stride, and now there's this uncertainty and another opportunity is presenting itself. Like, let's just do this shit for a couple of years. It was a steady check. The idea was to do it for maybe 5 years, and now we've been doing it for 15 years. On the flip side of it, I just think once we began to realize the platform, that the Tonight Show or Late Night and then the Tonight Show, could potentially become, we just used it to our advantage. You know what I mean? And I don't think we didn't. I don't even think we didn't exploit it. You know what I mean? But we just, we use it to our advantage. And those of us who, the Roots was like 12 to 15 people on any given day. And those of us who are invested in doing something outside of the Roots, like the James Poiters of the world, who's a composer, arranger for TV and film, he was able to, make that platform work for him and, to further solidify his place in that space. And I was able to, do the same thing, and Quest was able to do the same thing. We're able to navigate all these other sort of realms, because of the experience we've had in the Roots and the television experience that we've had on Late Night and Tonight Show. And then just the people that we get to, to interact with. You know what I mean? If there was ever, a pie in the sky wish list of, I would like to collaborate with this person or that person, I feel like in some way, shape, or form, I've been able to check almost all those boxes. So it's beautiful. Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember that De La Soul performance. So many iconic moments. That Tonight Show platform. I did want to ask you kind of a two-part question about, because you also went into acting. Mm-hmm. Do you have any, what makes you choose, because it's been really, even your acting career has been really unique in the terms of the specific parts you've chosen. Do you have any of that on the horizon? And do you have a favorite art medium, right? You're talking about visual artists, you're talking about music, you're talking about acting, you know what I'm saying? You're an author now, creative writing. Yeah. Do you have a medium where you're we might have a favorite from you, right, but do you have a personal favorite?
Yeah, no, I don't have a favorite. Maybe I do. I think, I owe it all to, like I said, to visual art, right? To, art camp, in Fairmount Park in Philly on Saturdays in the summertime, and then Fleischer Art Memorial, on the weekends. High School for Creative and Performing Arts, for the time that I was there before I got kicked out. I'm not an alum. You know what I'm saying? They big me up as having graduated from that school, but they kicked me out after 10th grade. The damage happened, the reason that I was sort of destined to attend that school it had been set into motion. And the Roots was the Roots at that point, you know what I'm saying? But yeah. And then what was the first part?
Is there any acting roles on the road? Because I said, your filmography is really eclectic.
Yeah,
theater, you've done TV shows, you've done some movies.
Definitely more acting on the horizon for me. More producing. TV film production, executive production. Stuff like that. We're taking off now. We have a TV film company called 215, and we just did, within the past year, did a huge deal. So there's lots more coming from 215 Entertainment. And for me, the whole acting, man, any opportunity to flex in a different medium is just fun. And it's the same, I'm using the same muscles, you know what I mean? Yeah. I think the way I see the world, the way I experience life is through the eyes and ears and, body of an artist. And once it's in your body, once that is, is in your system, I think once an artist, always an artist, so it's something that I'm able to apply to whatever it is that I do.
So we had an interesting conversation. We always do in our office. We had a well-known, I'm not going to say his name, we had a well-known DJ come into the office earlier in this week, and we were just having a conversation about hip-hop. And he was somebody that was basically, to him, like anything like current was not good. You know what I'm saying? Any current hip-hop music, if it's like played in the club, look, I see people like, he kind of right? And I asked that because it's like, for many people like you represent yourself and the roots, but you also represent like this era of hip hop, like where like this excellence of MCing and this era. So like, do you feel that a lot of times? And how do you think of like, are there like current artists that you like listen to or would recommend, or are you looking at kind of like current rap music now? Are you just saying like, nah, this isn't something that I want? I mean, because you have children. Like, if you when your children start playing it, are you like, turn this off, or or can you see like the artistry in some of it?
Yeah, when my children start playing it, I'm definitely trying to understand, just like why, and I'm trying to, I'm able to appreciate the artistry in it. I realize everything isn't for everybody. I think about, myself as a young artist. I wasn't, when I was 19, 20, 30, I wasn't making music for people who were 40, 50, 60. You know what I'm saying? I think there's space for it all to coexist. And that's because of, that wasn't always the case, right? So I think just because of where we are and, the things that, everyone has sort of, gone through on both sides of the coin, and all of our courage and sacrifice, there's just, hip hop as a culture is more diverse than, it's ever been. And there's space for all the shit that I love and the shit that I don't, love as much to exist within that. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's just sort of, that's where I'm at with it.
No, I appreciate it. Can we give it up one more time, y'all? Thank you. Before we close out, I did want to acknowledge your co-collaborator on the Upcycled Self, on the School of Thought, the master class that you did, Jasmine Martin, who's here with us as well.
And when I think about like how I even wound up, I guess at NYU, and you're soon to be Columbia. I'm gonna be at Columbia in the fall. It's from Jasmine and my work. We did this thing called the School of Thought that started at Carnegie Hall, and then we took it to Kennedy Center in D.C. And yeah, then, I think between School of Thought and, maybe some other stuff that we did during pandemic, I was able to sort of combine that curriculum and all those ideas and come up with, the lesson plan for the Art of the MC, which is the name of my class.
Beautiful, beautiful. So can we give it up one more time?
Thank you, guys.
The greatest, the GOAT, the talented Tariq Trotter. I didn't even get to talk about stream of consciousness. Just real quick, is there a producer you're working with? You've been doing the
Absolutely.
Producer and it kind of EPs. Are you working with somebody?
Yeah. Streams of Thought, Volume 4. Like, we put 3 out, but Volume 4 has been done for some time. And I think it's a timeless classic. I think all the artists that I had collaborate on it gave me a verse that, it wasn't necessarily trendy or of the moment. So yeah, I think it's still something to look forward to. Okay. Even though, I think the record's been done for about 3 or 4 years at this point. But
wow.
Yeah, that's done. Cheat Codes with Danger Mouse.
Yes.
Volume 2.
Crazy.
Volume 2 is coming.
Gorgeous Game. Yeah. So Volume 2 of Cheat Codes.
Yeah, Volume 2 of Cheat Codes is coming. Me and Madlib got an album like we in the middle of right now. Oh my God. Just lots of stuff, man. I am definitely. And then a new Roots album.
Oh, hey. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us again, man. We appreciate you. We appreciate your artistry. Again, my brother, love you.
Thanks for having me.
Black Thought, a.k.a. Tariq Trotter, y'all. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed our interview with Black Thought. Shout out to One Hood Power for this one-on-one Hood Power. Obviously, your mom's house email for putting everything together and helping us get Black Thought. We're going to have more important interviews in the future. But next week, we'll be right back at the table with more politics and what's going on in the world. So stay tuned. This Week in White Supremacy, y'all. Peace. See y'all next week.